My name is Vivian Hartley. I am 41 years old, and on the 14th of September, a Saturday at exactly 11:47 in the morning, I stood in the parking lot of the Belmore Estate in Scottsdale, Arizona, and watched 32 of my catering staff load their equipment back into 6 white vans. Every chafing dish, every floral centerpiece I had provided, every linen napkin folded into swans, every bottle of imported sparkling water, every handcrafted appetizer that my team had been preparing since 4:30 that morning, all of it gone, rolling out of that parking lot one by one, while my sister's wedding guests stood on the stone steps of the venue, confused, pulling at their collars in the September heat, waiting for a reception that was never going to happen. My sister Courtney called me 11 times in the 6 minutes it took for the last van to leave. I did not answer a single one. My mother called twice. My Aunt Patricia called once. My brother-in-law Gerald, the man who had told me 6 weeks earlier that my presence at this wedding would make the photos look uneven, called 4 times in a row from a number I recognized as the venue coordinator's desk phone. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat of my car, rolled the window down, and listened to the desert air. Somewhere behind me, I could hear voices rising. Someone said, "This is insane." Someone else said, "What is happening?" I heard my mother's voice crack on the word Vivian from somewhere near the entrance doors. I did not go back inside. What they did not know, not a single one of them, was that the company whose vans were pulling out of that lot was mine. Belmore Premium Catering and Events, LLC. Founded by me. Owned entirely by me. Staffed by people who had followed my instructions to the letter because I had given those instructions in writing, in advance, with a signed letter of cancellation attached. And every single person at that wedding, from the florist they had hired independently to the DJ standing next to a silent speaker system, had received a copy. This is that story. Before we go any further, I want to pause and ask you something. What part of the world are you watching or listening to this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. I would genuinely love to know. And if you connect with stories about women who were written off by their own families and quietly built something so powerful it changed everything, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. It means more than you know. Now, let me take you back to where this actually started. I grew up in Mesa, Arizona, in a 3-bedroom house on Crestview Lane with my parents, Daniel and Sandra Hartley, my older sister Courtney, and my younger brother Marcus. My father worked in commercial real estate. My mother ran the household and, as she described it for most of my childhood, ran it beautifully. We were comfortable. Not wealthy, but comfortable. There was always money for Courtney's figure skating lessons and Marcus's travel baseball. There was always a discussion to be had when I needed anything. I want to be fair about my mother. She was not a cruel woman. She was a woman who had decided, somewhere before I was old enough to notice, that Courtney was the one, the shining one, the one who would marry well and wear white and stand at the center of every room and make the family proud in the way that families like ours understood pride. Courtney was 2 years older than me, 5'8", and had the kind of effortless confidence that I used to believe was something you were either born with or weren't. She had blonde highlights she maintained every 6 weeks, a group of friends who dressed like a catalog, and a laugh that carried across rooms. My mother described her as magnetic. She was not wrong. I was quieter. I was the one who read books in the car on family road trips and kept a notebook and wrote down observations about people in restaurants. I was the one who, at 14, started making sandwiches and selling them to my classmates out of a cooler I had talked my father into buying me. I made $42 in a single Thursday and felt more alive in that moment than I had felt at anything in years. I told my mother about it at dinner that evening. She said, "That's nice, Vivian," and then turned to Courtney and asked about a boy named Jake who had asked her to homecoming. That was the pattern. My moments were nice. Courtney's moments were events. By the time I was 22 and had graduated with a degree in hospitality management from Arizona State University, I had already spent 2 summers working at a catering company called Prestige Events in Tempe, learning everything I could about food service logistics, vendor relationships, and event operations. The owner, a 60-year-old woman named Barbara Jung, told me on my last day that I had a mind for this business and that I should not waste it working for someone else. I kept that sentence in the back of my head like a coin I was saving. Courtney, at 24, had just gotten engaged to a man named Gerald Pruitt, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a leased BMW, and had a jaw like a magazine cover. My parents treated the engagement like a national holiday. My mother cried at the announcement dinner. My father ordered champagne. I congratulated them genuinely, raised my glass, and went home that night and started drafting a business plan on a yellow legal pad. I want to give you 3 specific examples of the way my family treated me during those years, because I think it is important to understand that this was not one bad moment. This was architecture. This was a structure built over time. The first was Thanksgiving of 2014. I had just signed the lease on my first commercial kitchen space on East University Drive in Tempe. It was small, it smelled like old grease, and I was so terrified I could barely sleep. I told my family at Thanksgiving dinner. My father looked at me over his glasses and said, "Catering? Like setting up tables?" My mother patted my hand and said, "Just be careful with money, sweetheart. These things don't always work out." Courtney had just been promoted to regional sales manager at her company, and my father gave a small toast to her at the table. I ate my turkey and said nothing. The second was the spring of 2016. I had just catered my first event above $10,000 in revenue, a corporate retirement dinner for 140 guests at a hotel in downtown Phoenix. I had hired 3 staff members and purchased a commercial refrigeration unit. I called my mother to tell her. She listened, said good for you, and then told me she had just put a deposit down on Courtney's bridal shower venue and did I know a good florist. I referred her to a florist I had a vendor relationship with and did not mention that the referral was professional. The third was Christmas of 2017. I had grown the business to 11 full-time employees and had recently rebranded under the name Belmore Premium Catering and Events, named for the street in Scottsdale where I had moved our primary operations to a larger facility. Annual revenue was just under $400,000. I brought a printed summary of the year to Christmas dinner because I was proud, and because somewhere in me I still believed that if I put the numbers in front of them, they would see it. My mother set the paper to the side without reading it. My father said, "Good." Gerald, who was by then married to Courtney and had developed a habit of speaking for the family in ways that I found difficult to describe without seeming petty, said, "That's impressive, Viv, but commercial catering is a brutal industry. Most of those companies flame out by year 5. He said it pleasantly, with a small smile, and then turned to talk to Marcus about the Cardinals game. I took my paper home with me. I did not bring papers to Christmas again. The wedding planning began in February of 2018, when Courtney and Gerald decided to renew their vows in a ceremony that, as my mother described it, would be the event she had always wanted the first wedding to be. They had married simply in 2015, courthouse and a dinner afterward because Gerald's mother had been ill. This time, no limitations. The venue was the Belmore Estate, a property that had recently opened for private events in North Scottsdale. The guest list was 230. The catering budget, my mother mentioned casually in a phone call, was somewhere around $45,000. I heard the name Belmore and felt something turn over in my chest. Not because I had any plan yet, just because. I was not on the planning committee. That consisted of my mother, Courtney, a wedding planner named Diana, who Courtney had hired at $3,000 a month, and Courtney's best friend Renata, who worked in interior design and had very strong opinions about everything. I attended one planning dinner in March, was asked to taste test 2 appetizers and confirm whether the salmon was fresh enough, and was not invited back. I assumed I would be asked to attend the wedding as a guest, as a sister, as family. I found out otherwise on the 28th of July, a Saturday, at 2:16 in the afternoon. My mother called. She sounded careful in a way that I recognized immediately, the way she sounded when she was about to say something she had rehearsed. "Vivian," she said, "I need to talk to you about the wedding." "Of course," I said. I was at my desk reviewing an invoice for a corporate lunch event at a financial firm in Chandler. 48 guests, full setup. My largest weekday booking of the quarter. Courtney and I have been talking, she said, and we want you to know that this comes from a place of love. The wedding is a very specific aesthetic, very curated. Diana has a vision for how everything should look and feel, and we are all trying to make Courtney's day exactly what she has always imagined. Okay, I said. And we feel, my mother said, and please hear this in the spirit it is meant, we feel that it would be better if you didn't come. As a guest. I said nothing. It's not that we don't love you, she said, faster now. It's just, and I hate to say this, you know I do, but you're in a different place financially than the rest of the family right now, and Courtney feels that having you there might make things feel a little, well, uneven. The photos especially. Diana was very clear about how she wants everyone in attendance to present. And Gerald said, I said, Gerald said what? A pause. Gerald said he thinks it would be awkward. For the dynamic. You know how these things go. I did know how these things went. I had spent 41 years learning exactly how these things went. I understand, I said. And I meant it, not in the way they hoped. I understood completely. You're not upset? My mother said. No, I said. Tell Courtney I wish her a beautiful day. I ended the call. I sat very still for approximately 4 minutes. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the Belmore Estate event venue's website, and looked at their preferred vendor list for catering services. Belmore Premium Catering and Events was listed first. I had been on that list for 14 months. I had catered 4 events at that venue. The venue coordinator, a woman named Teresa Wills, called me personally for anything above $30,000 because she trusted my team's execution. And Courtney's wedding, with its 230 guests and its $45,000 catering budget, was exactly the kind of event Teresa would have called me about, which was why, when I went back through my email archive, I found the inquiry from Diana, the wedding planner, dated 6 weeks earlier in June. She had reached out to Belmore Premium Catering and Events for a quote. My office manager, a woman named Chris, had responded with our standard intake questionnaire. Diana had never followed up. They had gone with a different company, a company called Citrus and Gold Events out of Tempe. I read that email chain 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, went to the kitchen of my facility on Belmore Drive, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stood at the counter for a long time looking at the wall. That was the moment I stopped being a sister, waiting to be included, and started becoming something else entirely. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I think the precision matters. I did not act out of anger. I did not plan anything dramatic or cruel. What I did was gather information. And then I made a business decision. Over the following 2 weeks, I learned the following things. Citrus and Gold Events, the company Diana had hired, was a 3-year-old operation run by a man named Derek Simmons, who had a reputation for beautiful presentation and inconsistent execution on large events. He had catered 2 events above 200 guests in the past year. One had gone smoothly, one had not, and there was a quietly circulating review on a wedding vendor forum that I was a member of that described a reception dinner that ran 90 minutes behind, with 2 of the 5 courses arriving cold. I also learned that the Belmore Estate Catering Agreement, the one that governed any event at that venue, contained a clause I had helped Teresa draft 18 months earlier when we had worked through the vendor contract together. The clause stated that any catering vendor operating at Belmore Estate was required to have on file with the venue a current certificate of food handler compliance, a valid commercial general liability policy of no less than $2 million, and a signed vendor ethics agreement that included a non-poaching clause for venue staff. These were standard in the industry. I had suggested them because they protected both parties. I pulled Citrus and Gold's vendor file from the Public Business Registry. Their general liability policy was listed at $1.2 million, below the minimum. I called Teresa on the 6th of August at 9:15 in the morning. Teresa, I said, I want to make sure everything is in order for the Pruitt-Hartley vow renewal on September 14th. I noticed Citrus and Gold is listed as the caterer. Teresa paused. Yes, Diana arranged that. Their policy limit is 1.2 million, I said. Your contract requires 2 million. A longer pause. Are you sure? I pulled it from the state registry this morning. Teresa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll have to verify that and loop in our events director. Of course, I said. I just want everyone to be protected. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I hung up. I went back to work. On August 9th, I received an email from Teresa. Citrus and Gold had been notified of the compliance issue. They had 30 days to resolve it, or their vendor status at Belmore Estate would be suspended pending review. She appreciated me flagging it. I forwarded the email to Chris and asked her to note it in our files. On August 21st, Diana the wedding planner called my office. My office number is listed publicly under the business name. She did not know she was calling the sister of the bride. She asked if Belmore Premium Catering and Events had availability for September 14th for a 230-guest event at the Belmore Estate. Chris told her we might have limited availability but would need to confirm. She took Diana's contact information and told her she would have an answer within 48 hours. Chris brought me the message on a printed note, the way she does with all intake inquiries, with the date and time written in the top right corner. I read it. I set it on my desk. I sat with it for a full day. If you are still watching, I want to ask you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this moment. Would you have taken the booking? Would you have walked away? Would you have called your mother? I genuinely want to know. These decisions are never simple, and the reason I tell this story is because I think the hardest choices are the ones no one ever talks about. Now back to September. On August 22nd, I called Diana myself. I used my direct line, which shows the business name on caller ID. This is Vivian Hartley, I said, owner of Belmore Premium Catering and Events. I understand you've been trying to reach us about a September event. Yes, Diana said, briskly professional. We have a vow renewal on the 14th at Belmore Estate. 230 guests. Full service. We had an issue with our previous vendor and need to move quickly. I understand, I said. Can you send me the event details and I'll review our capacity? She sent them within the hour. I read through every line. The menu was ambitious. Past hors d'oeuvres for 2:30 during cocktail hour, a 3-course plated dinner, a dessert station, a late-night snack setup, live carving station. The setup window was 6 hours beginning at 7 in the morning. The dinner service was set to begin at 7 in the evening. I put together a proposal. My standard rate for an event of this scope would have been $43,000. I quoted $41,000. I included a detailed menu, staffing plan, and timeline. I sent it on August 23rd at 11 o'clock in the morning. Diana called me at 2:45 that same afternoon. This is exactly what we need, she said. Can you have a contract ready by Friday? I'll have it to you Thursday, I said. We signed on August 25th. I collected a deposit of $20,500 paid by the wedding planner's business account, which did not carry my family's names on it. The contract was between Belmore Premium Catering and Events and Prism Wedding Design, Diana's firm. I had no reason to believe Diana knew I was anyone connected to the family. She hired vendors the way all wedding planners do, through referrals and reputation. I spent the next 3 weeks in preparation mode. I ordered the proteins. I confirmed the rental linens with my vendor on Camelback Road. I scheduled my full team of 32 for the 14th, including my 2 most experienced lead servers, a woman named Cora and a man named Jerome. I briefed everyone on the event timeline during our team meeting on September 7th. I said nothing about the personal dimension. It was not relevant to their work. What I did do on September 11th, 3 days before the event, was send a letter. I had a business attorney in Scottsdale named Paul Merritt who had drafted my original vendor contracts and had reviewed my lease agreements over the years. I met with Paul on September 9th and we went through the termination language in our catering contracts. Our standard contract included a force majeure clause and also included a clause that allowed either party to terminate with written notice of no less than 72 hours in the case of a material breach of contract terms, or a conflict of interest identified by either party. I drafted a letter. Paul reviewed it. It was precise and legally sound. I had it notarized on September 11th at 9 in the morning. It named the specific conflict of interest, which was that the event in question had been organized by members of my immediate family who had previously and explicitly excluded me from this event on personal grounds, creating a professional and ethical conflict that required me to withdraw to protect the integrity of my business operations. I attached documentation of the conversation, which I had recorded on my phone in accordance with Arizona's one-party consent law. I sent the letter to Diana's business address, the Belmore Estates events director, and, by certified mail, to my sister Courtney and my mother Sandra at their home addresses. I sent it on September 11th. It arrived September 12th. 3 days' notice as required by contract. I also sent a separate internal memo to my team, citing the cancellation and thanking them for their preparation. I paid every member of my team their full contracted day rate for September 14th, regardless of whether they worked. It came to $4,800 out of my own operating account. I refunded the deposit to Diana's business account in full the same day. That was the plan. That was all of it. No confrontation, no scene, no phone call to my mother. Just a letter, sent through proper channels, arriving in her mailbox on a Wednesday with her name typed neatly on the front. On the morning of September 14th, I drove to the Belmore estate. I arrived at 11:15. My team had arrived at 7 as scheduled and had completed the full setup. Every table, every centerpiece, every linen, every prepared dish in warming stations, everything we had committed to deliver. We had done our job with complete professionalism. Then, at 11:30, as I had arranged internally, my team began a systematic and orderly breakdown and removal of all equipment and food service items. The event was scheduled to begin at noon, with the ceremony at 12:30 and the reception to follow at 2. My family and their guests began arriving at 11. Courtney and Gerald were in the bridal suite. My mother was near the entrance, greeting early arrivals in a champagne-colored dress. I saw her through the glass of the main entrance as I walked across the parking lot. She had not seen me, or, if she had not recognized me in the clothes I was wearing. My work clothes, dark pants, and a Belmore premium jacket. Because she had never once visited my facility or attended an event I had catered. I stood in the parking lot and I watched my team do their work. Cora led the breakdown from the inside with the quiet efficiency I had hired her for. Jerome coordinated the loading. Teresa Wills, the venue coordinator, was aware of the cancellation and had received my letter. She was not obstructing us. The venue was our venue in the sense that we had a valid and active contract that had been properly terminated, and the equipment and food were our property. Guests began to notice at approximately 11:43. I know because I was watching the clock on my phone. At 11:47, Courtney came out of the building. She was in her wedding gown, an ivory off-shoulder dress that my mother had described to me once on the phone as the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Her hair was up. Her face was made up. She was beautiful. And she was furious in the particular way of someone who is trying very hard not to show it. "Vivian," she said. Her voice was low and controlled. "What is happening right now?" "We're completing our departure," I said. "Per the contract termination." "The contract," she said. "What contract?" "The catering contract. Between my company and your wedding planner. You hired Belmore Premium Catering and Events for today's event, Courtney. You just didn't know it was mine." She stared at me. Behind her, I could see Diana speaking rapidly into her phone. I could see my mother walking across the stone plaza toward us with her hands clasped together in front of her like she was approaching something that might break. "You can't do this," Courtney said. "I already have," I said. "The termination was filed 3 days ago and delivered by certified mail. You signed for it." My mother reached us. "Vivian," she said, "please, please, we can talk about this. Whatever we did, we are so sorry, just please, not today." I looked at my mother for a moment. She looked older than I remembered. Smaller. "Mom," I said, "I accepted this business because I thought you might like to know what I actually do for a living. Now you know." The last van left the lot at 11:52. There were 217 guests on site. I know because Teresa had given me the confirmed arrival count. They stood on the plaza and on the steps and in the parking lot in their formal clothes, talking to each other in low, uncertain voices, while the sun came down hard on the stone, and my sister's DJ stood next to his equipment without a timeline to follow and no food coming. Courtney and Gerald eventually ordered food from a restaurant. 3 restaurants, actually, based on what I heard later. It took until 4:30 in the afternoon to assemble enough catering to serve the guests something resembling a meal. It was not the vision Diana had described to me in August. It was not the photos my mother had planned. I drove home at 12:15. I sat in my driveway for a few minutes with the windows down. The desert smelled like heat and dry grass, and somewhere in the distance someone was running a sprinkler. I felt very quiet inside. Not happy, exactly. Not triumphant. Quiet. In the weeks that followed, my family went through several stages of response that I found interesting to observe from a distance. The first was anger. My mother called me 14 times on the afternoon of the 14th and left 3 voicemails, the last of which was simply her crying without words. Gerald sent a text message at 7:47 that evening that read, "You have crossed a line that I don't think you come back from. What you did today was cruel, and you should be ashamed of yourself." I read it once and did not reply. Courtney sent me an email 4 days later. It was long and detailed. She said I had humiliated her on the most important day of her life. She said what I had done was calculated and vindictive. She said she had spoken to a lawyer who told her I had acted within my legal rights, but that did not make it right. She said she did not recognize the person I had apparently become. She said she wanted me to know that I had broken something in this family that could not easily be repaired. I read the email 3 times. I wrote a response, and I want to share it with you because I think it is the truest thing I have said in this entire story. I wrote, "Courtney, you are right that I planned this. You are also right that it was legal. I want to be honest with you about something I have never said directly. I have spent most of my adult life building something real and quiet and mine, and not once in those years did anyone in this family ask to understand it. You didn't hire me for your wedding. You hired my company without knowing it was mine because you had never bothered to find out what my company was. I am not angry at you. I want you to sit with that. I wish you and Gerald a genuinely happy life. I mean that." I did not send it for 2 days. Then I sent it. My mother came to my facility on a Tuesday morning in early October. She came alone without calling first, which was unusual for her. I was in the back going over invoices when Chris brought her through. She stood in the middle of my production kitchen and turned in a slow circle, looking at the equipment, the stainless steel counters, the walk-in cooler, the framed health certifications on the wall, the whiteboard with the month's events listed. We had 11 events in October. She read the whiteboard without speaking. Then she said, "How long has it been like this?" 7 years, I said. She nodded slowly. She looked like she was doing the kind of quiet accounting, running numbers she should have run a long time ago. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. "That's what I've been trying to tell you." She asked me to have lunch with her. I said yes. We ate at a diner 2 blocks from my facility, and for the first time in memory, she asked me questions about my business, and she listened to the answers. Not everything was resolved in that lunch. Nothing so long in the building resolves in a single lunch. But something shifted. Something that had been closed for a very long time opened, just slightly, and I chose to step toward it rather than away. I have thought a lot about what I did and whether it was right. I have not come to a clean answer, and I don't think I'm supposed to. What I know is this: I did not crash a party I was not invited to. I withdrew a service that was rightfully mine to withdraw through proper legal channels with full notice, at cost to myself of nearly $5,000 in staff payments and a refunded deposit. I did not stand on a podium and announce my identity. I did not make a speech. I did not cry or scream or throw anything. I did my job until the moment I can no longer do it with integrity, and then I stopped. There is a particular kind of invisibility that is inflicted on women who build things quietly. We do the work, we build the infrastructure, we keep the machines running, and because we do not announce ourselves the way some people do, because we do not require the room to stop and look at us, we are mistaken for small, for lesser, for the kind of person you can leave off a guest list without consequence. I am not that person. I never was. And now they know it. If you are in a situation where your family has decided that your worth is determined by something other than what you have actually built, I want you to hear this. The invisibility they have assigned to you is not a verdict. It is a failure of their perception. Your job is not to perform loudly enough to be seen. Your job is to build something so undeniable that the truth does its own speaking. That is what I did. On a September morning in the Arizona heat, in a parking lot, in silence. What would you have done if the person who dismissed you had unknowingly placed their most important moment in your hands? Would you have told them? Would you have stayed? Would you have walked? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you think, because your answer says something true about who you are, and I think that matters. To everyone who has watched this far and stayed with me through this story, I want to say something from the part of me that does not often speak in public. Thank you. Thank you for being the kind of person who chooses stories about women building things in silence. Thank you for sitting with the complicated questions, the ones that do not resolve cleanly, the ones that ask you to examine your own choices alongside the narrators. There are stories like this one everywhere, told by women who were never asked to speak. We tell them here, one at a time, until the room learns to listen. If this story reached you, please subscribe to Revenge Chronicles and come back tomorrow. There is always another story, and the quietest ones are always the most powerful. Let me tell you a few things about what those 7 years actually looks like from the inside, because I think the world-building part of any story is the part that gets skipped. And it should not be skipped, because the building is the story. When I signed the lease on that first kitchen space in the spring of 2013, I had $11,000 in savings, a second-hand commercial mixer that I had bought from a restaurant that had closed in Chandler, and a list of 112 contacts I had built during my 2 summers at prestige events. I called every single one of them over the first 3 weeks. I did not call them asking for business. I called them to tell them what I was building and to ask if they had any events coming up where they might want a quote from a new company that cared about the details. 71 of them said they would keep me in mind. 23 of them sent me an inquiry within 60 days. 8 of those became paying clients. My first event was a retirement party for 40 guests at a law firm on 5th Avenue in Tempe. I served 3 past hors d'oeuvres, a buffet of 4 items, and a dessert table. I charged $3,200. I did all of the cooking myself, arrived at 6 in the morning, worked until 10 at night, and drove home with flour on my sleeve and a signed check in my bag. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex for a long time before going inside. Not because I was tired, although I was, because I was finally, for the first time in my life, doing the exact right thing. I hired my first employee in November of 2013. Her name was Chris, and she had been working the front desk at a hotel in Scottsdale and was looking for something with more movement. I hired her as a part-time office coordinator, and within 8 months, she was full-time. She is still with me. She knows the business the way a person knows their own hands. By year 3, I had 6 employees and a client list that included 4 corporate accounts, 3 wedding venues, and a catering relationship with a private club in North Scottsdale that sent us 3 to 5 events per month. Revenue that year was $212,000. I was not rich. I was also not struggling. I was building, methodically, the way you build anything that is meant to last. I want to tell you about the year I almost lost it, because I think you should know that the building is not always smooth. In the spring of 2016, a client I had been working with for 18 months, a corporate event coordinator at a large healthcare company in downtown Phoenix, left her position, and the new coordinator came in and cleaned house on all vendors. We lost that account on a Wednesday, with 30 days' notice. It represented $63,000 of annual revenue, nearly a third of what I had that year. I remember sitting across from Chris in the office and looking at the numbers and feeling the air go out of the room. I did not panic. I want to be honest about that, because I think there is a version of this story where I say I was fearless, and that is not accurate. I was afraid. I was afraid in the particular way of someone who has built something with their own hands and watches it become suddenly fragile. But I had learned something from Barbara Jung and from my years in this business, which was that fear and action can coexist. You do not need to stop being afraid before you move. You just move. I called 12 new prospects that week. I called Barbara Jung and asked her if she knew of any venues looking for an additional preferred vendor. I went to a business networking event I had been meaning to attend for 6 months, and I shook 40 hands and left 40 business cards. And within 60 days, I had replaced 41,000 of the 63,000 we had lost. By the end of that year, we had exceeded our previous revenue by $17,000. That is what building in silence looks like from the inside. It does not look like a triumphant montage. It looks like a phone call list and a networking event you were dreading, and a conversation with your office manager about whether you need to reduce hours. And then it looks like the numbers moving, slowly, in the right direction. In 2017, I made the decision to rename the company. I had been operating as Hartley Catering and Events, my own name on the door, and while there was nothing wrong with that, I had begun to feel that the name limited me. It placed me geographically in my history rather than in my present. I was also, by then, operating primarily in North Scottsdale, and I had a production kitchen on a street in that neighborhood that was starting to define our operations, a street called Belmore Drive. I worked with a branding consultant named Alicia Torres, who I had met through a vendor network and who charged me $4,000 for a full brand identity package. $4,000 that I counted carefully and decided was worth it. She gave me the name Belmore Premium Catering and Events, and a logo that was clean and dark, and looked like something that belonged on a high-end venue's preferred vendor list. Within 8 months of the rebrand, we had been added to the preferred vendor lists of 3 additional venues in the Scottsdale and Paradise Valley area. One of those venues was the Belmore Estate, which had just opened its event space and was actively building its vendor relationships. I met with Teresa Wills in March of 2018 and walked her through our portfolio, our compliance certifications, and our insurance documentation. She added us to the list the same week. I did not know, in March of 2018, that my sister was planning to hold an event at that same venue. I did not know it in April. I did not know it in May or June. I found out in July, the same week my mother called to tell me I would not be attending. That is timing. That is timing. That is not planning. The plan came after. I want to also tell you about the staff, because any story about a business is actually a story about the people inside it, and mine are worth naming. Cora has been with me since 2015. She is methodical and precise, and has a way of moving through an event space that makes everyone around her feel that things are under control. Because they are. Jerome came to me from a hotel banquet team in 2016 and brought with him the kind of large-scale event experience that I had not yet built internally. Marcus, my server, not my brother, a young man from Glendale who had worked his way through community college doing food service, joined in 2017 and had, by the time of the September event, become one of my most reliable leads. These are people who showed up at 4:30 in the morning on the 14th of September and set up the most beautiful event layout I have ever seen my company produce. They did not know everything that was happening. They knew there was a cancellation. They knew they would be paid regardless. They worked with the same professionalism they always bring, because that is who they are, and because I have tried to build a company that deserves that kind of professionalism. I paid them their full day rates, $4,800 of my own money, not because I had to, because they had earned it and because the people who show up for you deserve to be compensated for that. After the October lunch with my mother, things between us have been careful and honest in a way they never were before. We speak on the phone once a week. She's come to my facility twice more since that first Tuesday in October. She has attended one of our events as a guest, a large charity dinner in November, and she sat at a table near the back and watched my team work for 4 hours and did not say anything about it to me until the drive home, when she said, quietly, "You built something real." I did not respond immediately. Then I said, "Yes, I did." That was enough. Courtney and I have not spoken directly since I sent the email in September. I am not sure we will, or when, or what that conversation will look like when it comes. I hold no particular anger toward her. I also do not pretend that the uninviting did not happen, or that it was small. It was not small. It was my sister telling me, with the precision of a curated guest list, that I did not belong in the room, that I was beneath the aesthetic, that my presence would make her photographs uneven. There is no graceful reinterpretation of that, and so I sit with it, honestly, without rushing to resolve it into something more comfortable than it is. Gerald has not contacted me since the text message on the evening of the 14th. I consider that a reasonable outcome for everyone. What I have come to understand in the months since that September morning is that the public moment in the parking lot was not the victory. The victory was the 7 years before it. The victory was the first event at the law firm. The victory was calling 12 prospects the week we lost our biggest account. The victory was Chris and Cora and Jerome and Marcus showing up at 4:30 in the morning because they believe in what we have built together. The victory was Teresa Wills adding me to her preferred vendor list, and Diana calling my office because my company was the best option available. The parking lot was just the moment the story became visible. The story had been running for a very long time before that. There is something I want to say to any woman who is watching this and who knows this feeling. The feeling of building something real that no one in your immediate world is taking the time to see. You are not invisible. You have simply been assigned that role by people whose vision is too narrow to contain you. The assignment is not the truth. What you build is the truth. The numbers, the clients, the team, the early mornings, the setbacks you move through without an audience, those are the truth. And the truth has a way of surfacing. It will surface at a moment you cannot predict and perhaps did not intend. That is all right. Let it surface. Stand in the parking lot. Watch the vans leave. Let the air be quiet around you. Then drive home. Get back to work. The work was always the point. There are women in this world who have built entire empires that the people closest to them have never seen, who have signed contracts worth more than any family member imagined, who have hired and managed and built and lost and rebuilt, entirely without applause, entirely in the hours that most people spend watching television or sleeping in on Saturdays. These women exist in every city and every industry. They are the ones who arrive early, who stay late, who learn the compliance requirements and the vendor contracts and the insurance minimums because no one else is going to learn them for you. I am one of those women. I think if you are watching this, you might be one too, or you might know one, or you might be becoming one right now in the quiet hours when no one is watching. Do not stop. Do not explain yourself to anyone who is not genuinely curious. Do not shrink your success to fit the expectations of people who measured you when you were smaller. Let the work be the answer. Let the company name on the side of the van be the answer. Let the preferred vendor listing be the answer. Let Teresa Will's voice on the phone, professional and trusting, be the answer to every person who ever looked at you at a dinner table and changed the subject. You are building something. Build it well. Build it quietly. Build it with the kind of precision that requires no announcement. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, the truth will not need you to shout. It will simply be there, undeniable, in the daylight, for everyone to see at once. And you will be standing in the parking lot, perfectly composed, watching the vans do the talking for you. That is quiet power. That is what I hope you take from this story today. Not the drama, not the moment of exposure, not the photograph of 230 guests standing confused on stone steps in the September heat. Take the 7 years. Take the yellow legal pad. Take the 12 phone calls you made the week you lost your biggest client. Take the Tuesday morning that your mother walked into your production kitchen for the first time and turned in a slow circle and finally understood. That is the story. That has always been the story. I am Vivian Hartley. I am 41 years old. And I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And before I close today, I want to say something directly to the women who have been sitting with this story for the past hour. You did not stumble onto this video by accident. Algorithms are a kind of mirror. You found this because something in you recognized it. Maybe it is the family that overlooked you. Maybe it is the thing you have been building in silence that no one has asked about. Maybe it is simply the exhaustion of being underestimated by people who should know better. I see that. This channel sees that. And we are going to keep telling these stories until no woman who has built something real in silence ever feels like she built it alone. Subscribe, come back tomorrow, bring someone who needs to hear it. To every single person who watched this video all the way through, I want you to know that your time is not something I take for granted. In a world full of noise and distraction, you chose to sit with a quiet story about a woman and her company and her catering vans. And I think that says something genuinely good about you. You are the reason this channel exists. You are the reason we keep coming back every day to write and narrate and produce these stories from scratch. Because somewhere out there is a woman who needs to feel seen, and you are the community that makes her feel that way when she finds us. Thank you for every comment, every subscription, every time you shared a video with a friend who you thought might need it. Those small acts matter more than you know. If you are new here, welcome. If you have been here a while, thank you for staying. Follow Revenge Chronicles for a new story every single day. The quietest women always have the most powerful stories. We will keep telling them for as long as you keep listening.